Okay, we're live. We're just waiting for a couple people to get into the room before we start, but thanks for coming back to week 2 of the Astroimaging channel. Um, for those of you that were here last week, Hytham went over a pretty intense tutorial in pixinsight. It was very useful, but I think it also gave people a look at a really good look at pixinsight and how that works. I'm going to take a big step back and present more of um, a beginner introduction to Astro processing. Actually, I should say pre-processing calibration. I don't know quite where that would where it's going to lie, but either way, I think it'll be useful for a lot of people. Um, First of all, I just want to make sure. Can you guys, Alex, if you wouldn't mind just nodding away, can you see DeepSkyStacker on my screen? Yes, you can. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I can see it. This is Hytham. I'm back now.
Perfect. Thank you, Hytham. Um, so I'm going to assume that a lot of people know this already, but I'm going to start way at the beginning. When we do astro imaging, we take calibration frames. Calibration frames are a way to calibrate our camera or get our cameras used to taking these night skies. They actually calibrate out the imperfections at different areas of our camera. There are 3 types of calibration frames, but before I get into those, there are actually more than that, but 3 main types. And before I get into those, I'm going to start with lights. Lights are our images of the night sky. Those are our pictures. Those are the pictures with stars in them. You probably know what they look like. If you point up at the sky and take, even with the DSLR, a single image, that is a light. Because of limitations in how long we can expose, which I'm actually not going to go into today, but because of limitations as to how long we can expose, we end up taking multiple images. We call those images lights, and we end up stacking our lights. So DeepSkyStacker is a stacking program. Along with stacking, it also does calibration. I already explained a little bit of what calibration is, but let's go right into what the calibration frames are. I'm going to jump over a second to, you're going to see my face for a sec, I think, and then you're going to see Photoshop. I'm jumped into here because it's the easiest way to show you what these frames look like, and sometimes this is handy. And I'm hoping you have good enough resolution to see it, because sometimes you can learn a few things about your frames. And I'm going to give you an example of that. I had a terrible problem with an image that I took months ago, actually before I got my CCD camera. It was a cave nebula. And every time I processed it, every time I stacked it, my results came out really noisy. And I chalked it up to it being a difficult target, but I put a lot of time into it, and I was kind of surprised by my results. Just earlier, about half an hour ago, I was preparing for this, and I went to I was actually pulling up one of my bias frames from that particular run, and I noticed there was something wrong with it. It had a blue tint to it, and the histogram was spiked all over. I don't quite know why that happened, but I could tell just by looking at the bias frame something was wrong. At the time, I didn't look at it, so I didn't pick up on it. But it's good to see what calibration frames look like for that very reason. So what I have pulled up right now is a dark frame. This is taken with a DSLR camera, a Canon XS. So actually an older camera. I'm not going to say noise-free, because back then they had a lot more noise than they do now, but not very noisy. But this is a 480-second exposure. So this is this is built up over 480 seconds. But let me take a step back. A dark frame is an image taken at this same exposure time, if you're using a DSLR, the same ISO, and the same temperature as the lights, but with the lens cap on. So basically, you're taking a picture of the current that's built up within the camera, even though the lens cap is covered. And you're doing that with the intention of calibrating it out in DeepSkyStacker or another program, which we'll go into in a little bit. There's another type of calibration frame. This is a bias, and I've just pulled it up. It probably looks almost exactly the same as the dark to you, but it's actually a little bit different. The histogram is already pulled up. Hopefully you know what a histogram is, but you're going to see from this bias frame, there's nothing on it. It is way over to the left, and there's only a little bit of signal down there that's barely anything. So almost all the pixels are just lined right up on the left. Almost nothing's in there. This is the 0 point of the camera, where if nothing's recorded, this is what you get. And why is that? Because a bias frame is an image taken with the lens cap on at the slowest possible exposure your camera can take. It pretty much is just a picture of whatever the camera reads off the sensor with nothing on there, but without the buildup of time, without the buildup of noise that the darks have had. That's why the dark frame you'll see is 480 seconds, and this bias frame is 1/4000th of a second. I think that's the max with this camera. I think some cameras can go a little bit faster, but it's really inconsequential at that point. There's very little noise, very little differentiation between them. There's another type of calibration frame, and this is darks are very important. You should be doing darks right off the bat. This is a big intimidating factor for people to get over, flat frames. At a later point, I'm going to go into acquisition of flats just because I don't really have the time or the ability to show you exactly what you have to do. But to give you a good idea, a flat frame is an image of an evenly illuminated white object. It's taken at the same orientation as your lights. You want any imperfections, whether it be dust or vignetting, well, dust more specifically, to line up. When you take your flats, it's going to remove that in calibration. What I'm going to actually show you is, I'm pulling up a flat right now. This is a flat taken with a DSLR. Just looking at it, I'm going to say this is probably a sky flat, and actually I'm looking at my histogram and it's probably not a well-taken sky flat because the blue channel is way overexposed. I don't even know what I used this for, but I'm going to guess I probably had issues with it. But you'll see the red channel's dead center and the green channel's a little bit further over and the blue channel's spiked. But what does it really look like? I don't think you can see anything on there, so I'm going to go in and do one quick thing and equalize it. And when I equalize it, it's going to stretch out the histogram so that you can see a little bit more of it, and you can see the dust on it. So when I take this flat, the camera must be at the same orientation in regards to the optical tube as the lights. Those dust particles line up, and then in calibration, it removes them, and it removes them well. I shouldn't say I didn't realize. I always realized immediately off the bat, once I started using flats, how much of an issue, or how much of an improvement it made. When I got a CCD camera and it was that much more sensitive, I really saw how much of a difference it made, especially in my light pollution where dust donuts and dust tend to show up in gradients and I'm kind of fighting a lot of stuff. Flats make a big difference. So you're in Photoshop right now, and I'm going to actually jump back out to actually first, does anybody have any questions? We could go for a quick.
We've got a question coming in from Bruce, and we've got a couple of people. Josh and Christina have joined us since we started. I just want to. My name's Alex, and I want to invite you all to If you have any questions, type them into Q&A or to chat, and every once in a while I'll break in and say, hey, we got some questions coming up. So please do that. Meanwhile, just mute your microphone so that we don't get any feedback and you don't have an inadvertent interruption of something like that. We do have a question. Do we need Photoshop? And Bruce, I don't know if you mean that for do we need Photoshop in general for Astro image processing, or do we need Photoshop to watch what you're doing tonight? So could you go ahead and answer that one?
Yes. Oh, that's a difficult question because I hate spending other people's money. You can get away with other, and I'm not as familiar with all the processing software out there. You can get away with other software besides Photoshop, including some free software, but there are limitations. Photoshop can work with can do some things with 32-bit files, can do just about everything with 16-bit files, and a lot of the other programs have limitations. A lot of the free programs have those limitations. If you're asking me, can I go without Photoshop and can I buy pixinsight? Well, then yes, that's definitely a valid option. If you're looking for an alternative, a free alternative, I would say look to GIMP possibly. I used that a long time ago, kind of when I was on a Linux kick, but Photoshop is pretty good at what it does, and if you get used to it, you're going to use it for a lot of other stuff. You're going to use it for family photos. You're going to use it for, I use it at work all the time. I really can't imagine living without Photoshop. Is it necessary? No. Is the internet necessary? No. But could we live without it? I don't know. I hope that answers the question. If you have a more specific question about it, I'd be glad to answer it. But that's probably the best I could do with my limited knowledge of some of the other software packages out there. Do we have any other questions, or was that it?
I don't see any questions coming in on Q&A or chat as of right now, so why don't you proceed with what you were saying?
Okay. Now, you can see my screen right now. Good. DeepSkyStacker is up there. Okay. Now, we just went through lights, darks, flats, and bias frames. This is DeepSkyStacker. This is a free piece of software, and I don't know how they did it. I don't know how they made it free. I actually wish that I knew the developer's name so I could give him credit right now. I think it's Luke something, but I'm sorry, I don't remember. I'll try and get this onto the YouTube video because he deserves credit for putting this out there for free because it is awesome. I can't give enough credit out because it works really well and it's very simple. I don't even know if you need a tutorial on it, but here goes. Open picture files, top left. Easy enough. Those are your light frames. You click open. You put them in there. If you have a good naming structure, you've made it pretty easy on yourself. This says the Orion Nebula. I pick all of my frames of the same ISO. The Orion Nebula, you know, is an odd target, so I have frames of different exposures in there. But I would pick all of my frames of one exposure. I would select them. Dark files, you do the same thing, except you're picking your darks. Now, keep in mind, if you keep a dark library, a library of darks taken previously, you will be matching, again, the ISO and the exposure time and the temperature. There are some software programs out there that sort them for you. Backyard EOS actually puts the temperature in the file name, which makes it really easy to sort. Some people have trouble, specifically with DSLR cameras, some people have trouble with calibration, and I think that there are other ways to deal with it. You can take lots and lots of lights, you can use dithering, and you can stack in a specific way that will remove the noise a little bit better. But in general, I think go right through. So I'm jumping around a little bit, I'm sorry, but flat files, same way. You pick your flats. Offset bias files, you pick them. Bias files are very important when you're using flat files, flat files, because the bias gets removed from the flat immediately, and it actually gets removed from everything. But if you don't use a bias when you use a flat frame, you're actually introducing a little bit of noise into your your final calibrated image. So that's just one kind of specific reason to use them, but you might as well use all of your calibration frames if you're thinking about making your pictures better. It's every little step gives you a little bit more stretch you could do. It just makes it that much nicer, that much easier in the end. So you got everything open. Now I actually have a file list that I've saved here with all of my frames for a specific image. And let me see, these are darks, so I'm going to jump down to my light, just so I can show you one. And this is a light frame. This is the Iris Nebula. You saw it last week. Admittedly, that was a better version than mine. But you're going to see me process this a little bit of the ways through leading up to what you saw last week, except, and it's different data. This is my data. Previously it was Sergey's. But you'll see a little bit of the process up to where you get to that. So pretend that I open the picture files for the iris, the darks, my flats. My flats are specific to the specific imaging outing, so there's no such thing as a flat library. Your bias files, you can use the same bias over and over and over and over again. They may expire. It's probably a good practice to take new ones every 6 months. If you update specific cameras firmware, you probably have to take new biases, but for the most part, they're good for, I'd say, six months to a year, and no reason to say 6 months to a year besides that's the way I feel good about it. So I've got my file list in there. I check all, which I think they were all previously checked. Then you have a couple options. You can register the checked pictures, or you can stack the checked pictures. It'll let you do either one. It took me a while to kind of get an idea about what the differences are, but I think I figured it out. When you register the checked pictures, it creates a separate file that tells the image its orientation, or the orientation you're going for. You can register to a specific image. So you can pick, say, this image and say, I want them all to be oriented the same way this one is. And as it goes through, there might be some rotation, but it will save that orientation. So that's the basic difference. If I were to click stack, it would just stack them. It would probably use the first one as a registration image, and it would just go ahead and do it. But I'm going to just go ahead and click register check pictures, because if it's your first time with the data, you might as well do this. And you can see here, register already registered pictures. That's what I was saying. So you can register over previously registered pictures if you pick the wrong frame. Automatic detection of hot pixels. I think these are all default settings. Stack after registering. Select the best 90% of pictures and stack them. If you have good data, you might bump that up to 100. I usually don't touch this with my DSLR. Of course, there were times when I did and I just knew I had good data. And I would push that up to 100. If you're calling your frames manually, you could push it up to 100. If you're just checking out, like down here at the bottom, you can see the scores. There's some things you can kind of learn from them, but for the most part, you have to think about it. Are you calling your frames? 100% then. If you're not, then select the best, how many are good. If you don't have good results, bump it down. Even better, just go in and go through them manually. So, recommend settings. I suggest using this. I'm going to recommend the settings, and it's going to suggest a bunch of settings for me. I'm going to go back and show you those settings individually, but it's says you are processing long exposures and possibly good single SNR images, signal to noise ratio images. Use AHD debayering. That is checked. If you're using a modded DSLR, reset all white balance settings. That's already checked. If you are processing narrowband images, especially H-alpha, use superpixel mode. I am not processing narrowband images, so I do not check that. You go down this list and just use basic logic. Does it seem right? When you get to something like this, sigma clipping or auto-adaptive weighted average, that's where it gets a little bit harder to pick. You're probably barely going to see the difference in the results, but we're all about splitting hairs. What I'm going to do is take a step back where I'll be able to go into that in a little bit more detail right here in stacking parameters, and I'm taking a kind of a jump of a step back.
Before we do that,
yes, go ahead.
We have had a question come in, and we're kind of at a logical place to be asking, I think.
Absolutely.
Josh has asked, what does DeepSkyStacker use to grade the data, and can you do you get a report of each image? How is it graded, and is there some tool telling you what the full width half max is in DSS? Those are Josh's questions.
You know, that's a good question, and I think that the limits of DeepSkyStacker are the score, and I'm actually not sure what generates that, but I'm going to go down and see. Now I have a low scoring image right here, and let's see. I don't know if you could tell the difference between that and relatively high scoring image here. You know, I do not know the answer to that question, and I'm not going to pretend I do. At the very end, I am seeing full width half max, so it could be taking that into account and then scoring it across all the images. I am noticing as well that these scores are much higher on this image than what I typically see with my my edge, which is a much narrower field of view. So it's probably the number of stars and taking the full width half max into account.
Okay, could I interrupt here for a second? There are people that occasionally join us, and they may not know what the astroimaging channel is about right off and how to work it and things like that. It's best if you've just joined us, or if you're coming in from YouTube or someplace else, to go on over to the Q&A and or to chat. Chat is actually a little easier to use if you can get into the system, but only a few people can get into the system at a time. Otherwise, it gets a little confusing. We also ask that you go ahead and mute your microphone so that you're not incidentally interrupting the conversation by shoving a pencil around or something like that. You can actually do it. So mute your microphone. If you've got any questions, go ahead and type them into the sidebar on chat probably, or on Q&A. We're monitoring both. And there is probably somebody who knows the answer to every question that somebody else doesn't, and that's why we get together as a group. So a little bit later on, if somebody does know the answer to that particular question, when we're through with the formal presentation, we'll open it up, and as many people as we can contribute that way. Okay? So that's the way it's kind of working here. Thank you. I don't think there are any other questions current right now. Let me check Q&A. Nope, there are no other questions current right now.
All right, thank you, Alex. Actually, that's a great point. I am not insulted at all. Even if someone wants to scream out the question, the answer to the question, I just had to flip over to the end to see full width half max. So I'm not insulted if you. I'm actually happy to learn something new. That's what we're all here for.
So I can interject really quick just regarding the scoring system. So the scoring system within DeepSkyStacker is actually quite straightforward. It does just simply take the FWHM of the stars, so it just takes the roundness of the star itself and the intensity and the brightness of that star. And the higher the score, the better the image, and that's how it straight up works. There are certain processing tools out there, and I think it was, if I remember correctly, and hopefully if I am wrong, someone can correct me later on after the video has been posted, but Images Plus does use DeepSkyStacker to grade the images on the fly. So there are other tools that will actually call on DeepSkyStacker to rate the quality of the image. And as I stated, it's just the higher, the better. And that's it.
Thank you, Hytham. Somebody is always going to know the answer here. That's the great thing. Going on, we're stacking parameters, and there are a couple different modes that you may use. I think I stick to two modes: standard mode and intersection mode. I am not sure why you'd use mosaic mode. Maybe for a comet or something like that. There's probably a reason, but for whatever reason, I stick to standard mode or intersection mode. Intersection mode, as you can see here, takes the intersecting area of your images. So if you are, if your frame is moving through the sky, of course it's not doing that, but if your frame is moving through the sky a little bit, then you might want to use intersection mode, so it prevents you from getting those ugly corners. You can crop them out in post-processing just the same. It might be better to crop them out in post-processing because that way everything's there. You might see something interesting. You might discover your first supernova in the very, very edge of a field of image that you're cropping out. But for that matter, maybe you should be using just the standard mode, but or excuse me, using the mosaic mode, but I use intersection mode most of the time. Otherwise, standard mode I think would be more useful if you are stacking over multiple nights or with multiple filters where you have a specific reference frame that you always want the stars to be aligned on. So that way when you take it out of, if it's just H-alpha data and you have your RGB data separately, you can register them to the same image so that when you take them out into Photoshop, then you don't have to do much. You just put them into your channels and they are automatically aligned, and it makes life easy. It's pretty much impossible to align misaligned images in Photoshop, in my experience. I've never done it successfully. I've had some ugly results. I've had some okay results, but I've never been happy with it. That's what I think DeepSkyStacker and even pixinsight's for. In fact, that's why I bought pixinsight and later discovered DeepSkyStacker could do what I wanted. But that's actually for another conversation that we'll probably have in a few minutes. That was long discussion. Drizzle, keep these off for now. Don't use Drizzle unless you have a reason to be using Drizzle. If you're going to use Drizzle, it actually upscales the photos so that you're getting more resolution. You can use this in combination with Slight Dither to possibly get a little bit more resolution, but unless you know what you're doing with it, don't use it. You have to use small squares of the data. You can't use the full image or else you'll kill your memory in your computer. Don't bother with it. Align RGB channels in the final image. I don't do that. I like doing that in Photoshop myself. So lights, stacking mode. You can, I believe these are all the defaults. Kappa Sigma clipping, I believe, is the default stacking mode for lights. What is stacking? Stacking is, in general, combining exposures, combining multiple exposures until they become one. Well, there are a few ways to combine exposures. You can add them all and divide, and that's average. You can, and when I say add them all and divide, I'm talking about the individual pixels or the individual post-aligned pixels. If you average them, it's a pretty good way to get a nice image, but there are other things you could do that actually might, I'll say, more robust algorithms that might be applied to them that can give you better data or better final results. So without going too much into that, I believe Kappa Sigma clipping is the default. Kappa Sigma clipping, the pixels outside of the range are iteratively removed. Pretty much it just says if you're an outlying pixel, if something seems screwy, then we're going to reject you. and we're going to take the rest of the data and apply it to that. Median kappa sigma clipping does the same exact thing, except it takes that outlier and replaces it with the median value. So it kind of pushes it towards the median value. Both can be applied to different things. For some reason, they say, and I believe that the default stacking, this is somewhere that someone can chime in, please, but I believe the default stacking mode for darks, flats, and biases is median, and I don't have it, but for some reason I think they say use median kappa sigma clipping for darks, flats, and bias. Maybe because you have enough frames. With darks, flats, and bias, you're most likely going to have lots of frames available to you, whereas with lights, it's possible that you'll have fewer frames. But you can use median kappa sigma clipping with your darks, flats, bias, and darks, flats, and bias frames. Bias and offset are the same things. Kappa and number of iterations, I believe this is just ways to adjust the algorithm for what's rejected. And then how many times it wants to go through it.
Can I interrupt you here for a second?
Go ahead.
I am seeing the same screen no matter what you're talking about. Are you in fact going through different sub-windows?
I am. Can you not see stacking parameters?
I cannot see stacking parameters right now. All I see is the light frame and some things down below. Is that what everybody else is saying? Shake your head or what? Yeah, that's what we're all seeing.
I'm going to try and go to...
Yeah, because I'm sorry, just to interject really quickly, because I had a similar issue whenever I was working in Pi last week. So any of the pop-up texts,
yep,
they're not part of the actual application. It considers them as a separate entity altogether. It will not share the pop-up portion of it, unfortunately.
Got it. Then I don't really need this to talk about this stuff, and I'm pretty close to done. It does keep me kind of going, but I will continue on with that in mind. So excuse the long DeepSkyStacker screen. You do have some options as to how you want to, first of all, align the files. I always use automatic. Intermediate files, you can have it save the calibrated files as well as the final stacked image. That comes in handy every so often. Never would have thought to do that. pixinsight does it automatically, and I kind of like it now. In cosmetic, I do nothing, and I know you guys can't see this. I'm just going through this because I kind of had in mind that you would be able to see it. But output files, it lets you pick how you want the file to be saved. I always stuck to the defaults, autosave, and then it goes 001, 002, 003, etc. But knowing you guys can't see this, I'm going to jump right over to another screen. And actually, are there any questions right now? Because I'm about to jump into Photoshop.
I am monitoring the questions, and I see a suggestion. Perhaps you could share the entire desktop instead of the app. I'm not sure you can do that. Hytham may have some more experience.
I can try. I think it might get ugly quick, but let's see what happens. Yeah, hold on. I gotta get out of here.
It looks great right now. It's your full face.
Oh, do you not see my app?
No. You said it's going to look ugly real quick, and it was your full face. So that says something about your full face, and no, whatever.
Do you see? Can you see my full desktop right now?
I don't know what your full desk is. What I am seeing is a full DeepSkyStacker screen. Now I'm getting the full desk down below. Try going into one of those sub-windows that you've been playing with. I'm getting nothing different. There's a sub-window.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Somebody fixed that. Who was that? Bruce, I think, that fixed that.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. This is where I was, and I'm just going to jump through this quickly. These are your the modes. Standard mode. Standard mode goes through it. It's registered to the one specific image that you pre-registered. Intersection mode. and then your lights with your stacking modes, moving on through them. Good thing you actually brought me back here, because when you're done with this, you would click, and I don't want to do it just in case it's going to tie up my machine or anything, but you would end up clicking OK, and it would start. It might give you one more prompt, and then it would start stacking. It's going to go through for a little bit, and it's going to pop an image up on the screen here, and the most important thing to do is nothing. As soon as that happens, click the X, get out of DeepSkyStacker, don't save any changes to the image. You might be tempted to play around with the sliders here. Don't do that. It's only going to get you in trouble. And here you go, crazy screen again. Ooh, this is going to be... There we go. Okay. Now, I believe you can see my Photoshop screen now. Okay. Now, when I open up the output of DeepSkyStacker, I get an autosave.tiff. That's because I set it to save as a TIFF. It opens up into Photoshop right here, and the first thing I do is I have to go to image mode and change it to 16-bit. And I talked a little bit about that before, about GIMP not being able to operate, to work with 16-bit files. That really has its limitations, as you discover quickly. You really see the details just go away when you convert to 8-bit. pixinsight actually operates in 32-bit, as far as I know, and that's what prevents it from rendering everything immediately, kind of how Photoshop does. So let me just jump right in. So I've converted it to 16-bit. The first thing I usually do is I use a lot of shortcuts. So I'm going to say image, I don't even remember where this stuff is, but image adjustments curves, or Control M is much easier, a much easier way to do it. And you see this little, the black dropper right here. I have previously, but I'm going to do it now, double-clicked my black dropper and set these values to 30, 30, and 30. What that does is it sets my black point for the dropper at 30, 30, 30, which happens to be a good background color for deep sky photos. Some people might like it a little bit more blue. Some people might like it a little bit less blue, a little bit more red. It might depend on your target, but it's a good spot to aim for. So I've set it previously, so it's already there. So I already know that the darkest part of my image happens to be, I believe, somewhere down here. So I'm going to click it, and you can see immediately I get a good-looking background sky. Sometimes you have to be careful that you're clipping your blacks when you're doing that. Being that I set it at 30, 30, 30, it's probably not that big of a concern, but you can click Show Clipping right there, and it'll show you if you're clipping any data. Here I'm not. I can also see where these have fallen in my history. Can you guys, I'm sorry, you can chime right in. Can you guys see my history, my curves window?
Yes, we can, but remember, most of us are muted so that we don't interrupt you.
I know. I just wanted...
Otherwise, it could be cacophony here.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure you could see curves, because if you weren't seeing this, then it was a lot more difficult to explain.
We have had a couple of questions come up, so when you're good for questions, tell me, and I'll relay them.
Okay, I will be good for questions in 1 second. So, okay. You can see here that it's actually brought this slider down on the individual channels, but it's just the black point that it's brought down. So if I'm happy with that, which I kind of am, I'm not going to be critical right now just for the sake of time. If I'm happy with that, I'd click OK, lock it in. I'm going to go right back to curves, click Control M, and this gray dropper right here actually will allow me to do the kind of do my color calibration with it. It sets the midpoint, and I can click different areas of the image to help set that midpoint. If I click, now this can go bad. With galaxies, you can pretty much safely click inside of a galaxy and you'll get a pretty close to what you want image. With this particular image, I don't have much to click on, so I can click that and it might get real bad. It might do nothing, which actually is what it's doing right now. Nothing. If I were to click a star, it'd probably go ugly quick. See, there it goes. But as you can see, the gray slider when I was, the gray dropper wasn't doing much when I was clicking around. So for that, what that means is I'm pretty close to where I want to be with that dropper. Again, Control M to get you to curves. That's the quickest way. This up here, this white dropper, don't touch it. This up here is your white point, don't touch it. Keep as much headroom as you can because this is blowing out your stars. This is turning your colorful stars white. The only time you would touch that is at the very, very end, and you probably still wouldn't touch it then, maybe just to make a little adjustment. But go ahead with questions right now.
Okay. Josh and I have the same kind of question. It goes back to when you said, okay, stop with the DeepSkyStacker and come out of there. I want to know why you said that. You said because you'd get in lots of trouble. Is that a different way of saying, you know, there are better places to be processing this image? Josh's question goes, does DeepSkyStacker provide any color, any kind of color astrophotography auto balance similar to what Nebulosity provides for many of the cameras that are used there? So I think they're somewhat related when you start answering them. Okay?
Yep. Okay. DeepSkyStacker. Let me actually, I'm going to try and jump back in there and hopefully. Oh, you know, because I didn't finalize the image in DeepSkyStacker. I didn't get to that last screen where it shows me the image. But there are little ways in DeepSkyStacker that you can kind of color calibrate. I don't want to say color calibrate the image, but you can save settings in the image with a histogram stretch. The tools just aren't very good. They're a little bit difficult to work with. Now, I believe that you can set DeepSkyStacker to stack with the embedded camera's white balance, but I never do that. I prefer to do my white balance in Photoshop. I know some people have issues with white balance, and I don't know if maybe just I haven't been that critical, but I never really had those same issues. I had an IDAS LPS P2 filter, and I know that doesn't suffer from white balance issues as much as some of the others, so maybe that's where I kind of got it. But I've never used I've never had DeepSkyStacker take into account the white balance. I've always had it ignore the white balance, and then I would do my white balance just as I'm explaining it now. DeepSkyStacker's, yeah, I wish I could get in there because I just barely remember I minimally remember what some of the tools are, but it's really hard to come out of DeepSkyStacker with a nice looking image, even if you know what you're doing with the tools. You really have to get it into Photoshop and do curves. I think it's a basic level slider, and I don't think it's immediate updating. So I think you have to constantly set it. I might be confusing DeepSkyStacker with Registax. I've actually been using pixinsight more recently, so I had to give myself a refresher on DeepSkyStacker. But if that sufficiently answered that question, any other questions? If any questions have popped up, please throw them out here.
I think we're clear of questions right now, so okay. Go ahead.
I'm going to move on then, and I'm I think I'm making okay time. We'll see. I'm going to try and kick it up a little bit. So, I already showed you the curves window, but I didn't show you the curves tool. Now, curves and levels, as you see here, are two different tools for stretching your image. Curves is a bit more robust, and you can use it in more pointed ways. Levels tends to affect the image at large as a whole, whereas curves, you can do it in more specific areas. That said, I think you can do more damage with curves much quicker. So a lot of people prefer to do their initial image stretch in levels. I can go either way. I actually prefer to do it in curves, but I think to each his own. Whoever does it whatever way, they do it for whatever reason. So I'm going to open curves back up, and you can see this histogram. This actually looks like a good histogram right off the bat, a little bit narrow. So the way you do stretching is you pretty much just bend that curve up. And you can see as I bend it up, the image gets lighter and lighter and lighter. What I'm doing is anywhere that curve is bent up, it's stretching that histogram. Anywhere it's flat, it's not really doing anything to that part of the image. So for that reason, I want to kind of flatten out the end over here. And what that does is it prevents the brightest stars from getting too bright. You always want to keep your stars dim because everything's going to get brighter as you go. But you don't want to go too far with that. So I've brought that to a really bright point, but I'm just going to click it. I'm not going to necessarily make this image look great. I'm just going to make this image, I'm going to kind of show you the steps going through. So after you do that, you've brightened your image, but you brighten your background. So what you want to do now is you want to bring your black point, which is this thing right over here, you want to slide it over here. It's pretty much the same thing, and I'm sorry about my dog barking in the background, but it's pretty much the same thing that we did with the black point slider, except it did it individually in each channel, whereas here you're doing it globally on the image. You are pretty close to color balance here, so you don't have to go much further on that. You may still, but you're pretty close. So I brought that black slider down, and again, you want to make sure you're not clipping. Actually, I'm looking down here. I'm actually going to 48. They say 30-ish. I don't know why they say that, but it's good to do this in small steps. It doesn't break up the histogram too much. So I'm going to lock that in at 30. I'm going to go back. Normally, I'd probably do it in smaller steps to get a little bit more out of it, but let's go back and bring it down a little bit more. And I'm going to lock that. And actually, I'm going to click Show Clipping. Make sure that I'm not clipping out anything. I look around it. I would see in the perimeter of this black stuff if I was clipping it out. I can actually see some little stuff right there. I might have gone a touch too far. It's hard to say, but I think for that matter, I'm fine. I'm going to click OK. This is just starting to come out. And before I step out of the curves menu, I want to show you one of the cool things about curves. I can hold Control and click anywhere in the image, and I'm going to pick a dark spot in the image. I'm going to go down to the corner here. I'm going to click that dark spot. I can see where on the histogram that dark spot is. That was the background. So I actually have a lot of leeway in there between the background sky color and this. And that spot right there that I had clicked. But what clicking there does is that puts a lock point right there, or it kind of locks the histogram stretch right there. So I can say go elsewhere, maybe just to the nebula, and hit Control click, Control left click, and it puts another lock point there. And what that does is that actually, and now that that one's the one that I'm using, I can just tap up the keyboard and bring that. Now, it's not just going to brighten the nebulosity. It's going to brighten a lot of the it's going to brighten everything in the in the color range, or excuse me, the brightness range of the nebulosity. So you see it getting brighter over on the left side over here. But just in general, that's a good way to give you an idea of what the curves tool can do. I can also, rather than tapping, I can bring it up or down just manually. You see, if I bring it way over here and kind of spike it up way over here, it's just the stars that get it. If I bring it down here, it's the nebula that's starting to get it. And if you're careful, you can actually sometimes use multiple spots and bring them down and just highlight certain areas. The sharper your curves in general, though, the easier it is for the image to fall apart. So you do want to be careful with that. So I'm going to go in really quickly, and what I would probably just do is I would probably just do that, and then click over here, get it looking a little bit brighter, and probably lock that in like that. This is a really dim target. The Iris Nebula, you're really just going for the central region there, and then hopefully pulling out some of the dark dust. You saw a good job of it last week. I am a lot way behind time as to where I was hoping to be, but I'm going to show you a few things really quickly. Gradient Exterminator is an add-on program. I don't remember what it costs. I think it costs $50, but don't hold me to that. But if you have light pollution problems, Gradient Exterminator is a great program. And very quickly, what you do is you use a lasso tool. You circle, I'm sorry, what is going on here? Use a lasso tool. You circle your nebulous region. I have some dark dust here that I want to preserve, so I'm going to circle all the spots of dark dust that I know exist. Let's just say that's it. You invert the selection. So I have unselected my dark dust in my nebula region. Go to Filter, RC Astro, Gradient Exterminator. Your first iteration of Gradient Exterminator is usually coarse and medium, done like that. You click OK. It immediately removes the gradient from the image. This is an amazing tool. I can't say enough about it. Worth every penny. Like magic. This is just the first iteration. I can go further and even further flatten the background. I don't think I have to. I'm going to deselect this. You get a better view of what we're looking at. Another add-on that I purchased for Photoshop that I think is well worth it is Carboni's tools. There's really only a few tools that I use in it. Deep space noise reduction, I don't have to use it on this image, but I use that frequently. For some reason it does a good job. It puts a quick luminance mask on your image and then reduces the noise in the dimmer areas. I don't use the fake diffraction spikes. I've seen them used. Sometimes as jokes. I don't suggest them. You can, if you want diffraction spikes, you can put fishing wire or anything across your SCT or your refractor and get them that way. You don't have to use software to get it. Are there any questions at this point?
We haven't had any questions come in on the chat or the Q&A.
Okay. I am going to show you something that I'm going to go through very, very quickly, and it's you kind of have to know this. Layers in Photoshop, one of the really cool features, you can stack things on top of this image that help the image along. You can make your changes in Photoshop in layers. They call them adjustment layers. Now, I don't use adjustment layers, but it's probably a good thing to do. But rather than showing you it that way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a quick way that a quick tip that I use to get a little bit more detail or sharpening out of certain images. I am going to duplicate this layer. The way I do that is right-click and click Duplicate Layer. Comes up Background Copy. I'm going to quickly put that layer on Overlay mode, and then I'm going to go up to Filter, Other, and High Pass. Now this is actually applying this filter to the stars. If you know enough about star masks, you might want to do a star mask before doing this filter, but this is going to apply to the stars, so it's going to give you a little bit of a the effect's going to be exaggerated. You don't need much in the high mask filter, but this is a good way of sharpening small details. You actually don't need much at all. And just looking at it, and I hope this doesn't take too much CPU power. I don't see it doing anything. Let's see if it did something. Oh, I guess it did apply it. Yes, it did apply it. And let me go to there. You can barely see the difference. I don't know if I screwed something up there, what went on, but
have you deselected the areas?
I did deselect the area, but I don't know if that would have. Let me see. Deselect gradient exterminator. Deselect. I duplicated the layer. I changed blending mode to that. I applied the high pass filter. Oops, I'm sorry. It might not have been aggressive enough, but either way, I might have actually had to bring the high pass slider up significantly. I made an action that does this high pass filter at different layers, and it's kind of a poor man's wavelet type thing. So it grabs different kind of sizes of objects in the image and allows you to sharpen those particular sizes individually. And I do it with layers and the opacity. I'd love to show that off, but that's going to have to be at a later time. And I really hate to rush through this, but there's one other thing that I want to show really quickly. So I'm just going to delete this that I put on there. Layer masks are really good for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you have a higher dynamic range image, you're trying to blend a couple layers together, it's a good way of doing it. There's a good way to bring out dark dust in an image using a layer mask. You can also create a star mask similarly. So, and I'm going to do the quick and ugly layer mask, and I'm hopefully not going to miss anything. Hopefully you can understand it well. But the first thing you're going to do is you're going to duplicate your layer. So I've duplicated and I have it as background copy. Right down here is add layer mask. I'm going to add the layer mask. Right up here, this white box is your layer mask. Over here is the layer that's going to have the layer mask applied to it. So if I click that layer and activate it, I'm looking at that layer, and I'm going to select that layer. So I actually hit Control A, which is select all. Then I'm going to hit Control C, which is copy. Then I'm going to jump over here, and I have to get into the layer mask. And to get into the layer mask, you have to hit Alt and then click. So it gives me this white screen. I'm going to paste my star. I'm going to paste that image directly into here, and what I now have is the monochromatic version of that image pasted in here. It's just the luminosity that I'm dealing with. It's whites and blacks, and in layers, white reveals and black conceals is the way to remember it. So what I'm going to do is, with that layer mask, I could go in and do some stuff with that layer mask, but the way you would make a layer mask more aggressive, or if you were making a star mask out of this, is actually you can do it with curves, but I'm going to show you how to do it in levels, less dimensions to worry about. You can take your white point slider, slide it all the way down here. Take your black point slider, slide it all the way up here. And let's see what's going on here. I just want whites and blacks for the most part. I see a little nebula in there. I think I'm getting pretty close. There's probably the nebula is going to be a little bit brighter than some of the stars, so I'm getting pretty close. Let's see. I want to look closely and make sure the stars are similar in size, not much blown out from the thing. They aren't great, but you want them to be similar in size. And then what you're going to go ahead and do is, first of all, you want to invert the layer mask, which I think is just Control-I. Adjustments, invert. Yeah, it's Control-I. So I'm going to invert that. So now you can see on the white background are stars. Typically with a layer mask, the other thing you're going to do is you're going to go in and give it a Gaussian blur. Just very few pixels. 1 to 2. Excuse me. 1 pixel might be enough. I'm not seeing much difference on my screen today. I don't know if my eyes are going bad or something, but I'm not seeing much difference. But you just want to blur it enough so that it's not giving you a sharp image. Your results are what tell you your results when you go onto your layer. What tell you onto processing your layer? What tell you how good your layer mask is. So I'm going to deselect that image and just quickly with the star mask on there, I'm going to go into curves and I'm going to stretch the image. And it's going to get ugly quick, but what you might be able to see is if I've done this right, the stars are not changing. The stars are staying the same color and the same brightness no matter where I slide that, but the nebula and background are changing. So this star mask is in a layer. So as you stack layers on top of that or below that, you're revealing or exposing or showing off certain portions or covering up certain portions. So this is kind of the theory of layers, is that you can do stuff on top and even set an opacity, change the opacity, do certain things to reveal it. One other thing I frequently do in layers is I add color to my stars. So I'm going to take this background image, I'm going to duplicate it. Don't know if it has to be up at the top, but we'll put it up at the top. Actually, this is, I'm jumping way ahead, but this is a good way to color up your image in general. Color mode on layers. And you want to go to the saturation box, which is Control-U, boost your saturation. Good way in general to boost your saturation. At the same time, you get a lot of ugliness, but you're doing it through a layer, so you can always apply it, go in, and remove it. And that way, when I just click this reveal, this eye, it shows it off and doesn't. Are there any questions at this point?
There are lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of questions. So
okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think we're up to 3 in that lots of. We're back to Photoshop, and Bruce wants to know are the curves, levels, and some of these other things in Photoshop elements, or are they reserved for their big brother?
I am not sure about that. There is a limitation. I'm not sure. There is a limitation of Photoshop elements, but I don't remember what it is. It might have to do with whether you can process the 16-bit files in curves. I don't know. If anyone out there knows, they're welcome to chime in, but I can't answer that.
Josh is chiming in that we've got. How close are we to the point where we can open up and unmute everybody? How much more do you have in your basic presentation?
You know what? I have a whole other presentation that I'm going to put off to a later date because I'm not going to get to it. So I think we could open up Q&A right now.
Josh, can you, let's see, Hytham, who's controlling the mutes? Can we unmute us all yet?
At this point, I can jump back into and unmute everyone as well.
Okay. And Josh, I'm going to give you the floor. Can you handle it? No, not can you. That didn't sound right, did it? Can you speak into the group?
Yeah, Photoshop Elements has a lot of similar processing capabilities, but it can only be done in 8-bit for most of the processing routines. So it's not ideal to say the least. I mean, you're just not going to get the same quality images. There's a lot of I can't remember the word for it, but where your pixels look like they jump from one pixel to the next, almost like stair stepping on the pixels at the end of your picture.
I think posterization, right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, posterization.
I couldn't remember that earlier in the presentation. Yeah.
Adam, also regarding gradient exterminator, do you only use that at one point during your processing routine, or do you use it fairly early on and then every once in a while throughout processing?
I use it early on. I showed you earlier the, I think it's called rough and mild or whatever it's called. I showed you that. Later on, I go into the finer detail, and the way you do that is you actually select the background minus the stars. So you use the range selector tool, and then you go to high detail and you use the other selection that's up top, and I do it that way, and that I get the best results from. I was hoping to move on to show pixinsight a little bit because that has DBE in it, which is which does similar things. I didn't get an opportunity to do that, so maybe we will have a chance to do that next week.
I think that's just important to point out, because if you try and use gradient exterminator all at once at the end of your processing, you're not going to get a good smooth background.
Yeah, once at the beginning, sometimes I might use it a few times.
Right.
You know, with processing, it's an odd thing. Do something. If you can't tell whether or not it made a difference, take it back. Don't do it, because it did make a difference, and you don't know when it's going to come out. But minimal is best. If you do something, you can't tell, take it back, try something different, because the less you do on the image, the less integrity you're taking out of your data in general.
Alice, was there another question that you were mentioning?
Bruce, can you, I don't see you on the list here. Can you go into Q&A? Do you have any questions or anything right now? I think you're coming in from YouTube. So type something. Tell me if you got any questions. But all of the chat questions have been addressed. And all the comments. There was a comment earlier on. What was it about? Is the gradient tool in Photoshop?
Stacking in drizzle mode. There was quite a few conversations earlier on this year when the HA targets were up and people were doing one-shot color targets, or doing HA with one-shot color. And Craig Stark posted a really interesting article in his website about using drizzle mode when you're trying to make up for the 1 out of every 4 pixels being red.
Yeah, with super pixel mode.
Well, super pixel mode, but then there was also the option for drizzle mode, which actually helped a lot. I experimented with a couple of those in nebulosity when I was playing around there.
Okay.
And basically what it did was help restore your resolution after going to super pixel mode.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I never actually hadn't heard about that, because I didn't like super pixel mode for that very reason, especially when you're trying to apply it to RGB data that was 4,000 pixels across and you're applying 1,200, and then then you're stuck with a 1,200 pixel wide image. So I felt like I was back in the 90s. Right.
So it was kind of an effective way at stacking and losing your resolution, but then regaining it afterwards. So it was an interesting way to do it.
I have a question regarding that drizzle.
Yep.
When you have a shot that you're doing, let's say it's a nebula, maybe not a planetary, just a plain nebula, do you always use the 2 drizzle or 3 by drizzle in Stacker, DSS?
Specifically for a planetary nebula, it's probably the best target.
Say for instance, M27.
It's probably the best target to use it on. I mean, I'm thinking back, and the targets that I've used it on are the Ring Nebula, and I think I also used it on the Blinking Planetary. So I think planetary nebula are probably the most likely targets you're going to use drizzle on. And there's no reason to have all that wasted space around them unless unless it has a great star field or something. But that would be the #1 reason to use it, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I'm working on M27 now, and also I had Veil, and I've allowed other people to just go ahead and process them for me because I'm just not even close to being ready for it to put anything up. But yeah, I was just wondering about that drizzle, whether it's a good thing to do or not prior to doing any processing. Basically, in DSS, I was wondering. Just leave it alone or go ahead?
You know, I would try both of them. I hate to say it. I would try doing drizzle and trying without it. Now, first of all, when you use drizzle, you're going to have to select a small portion of the image. You can't do drizzle on the whole image. I don't think no matter what type of computer you have, I don't think your computer is going to handle it. It's going to use too much memory. So you're going to have to take a small portion of that image, and I don't remember DeepSkyStacker's terminology for it, but select it. And then when you do drizzle, the output is a much smaller image that is upscaled. So if you're asking would I recommend it, I've tried it. I don't even remember if the image that I finally presented at the end was the one that I used drizzle on. But I know, like I said, I know I used it for the Ring Nebula. I can remember the image, but I don't really remember the specifics. The specific I remember about that image is I had a little bit of drift in it, more than I was happy with. So I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? One thing, if you have a question, scream out. I was really hoping to get into pixinsight today just to show you a little bit of the differences between Photoshop and pixinsight, and it might be a good reason to save it for next week. You'll be able to. I'm going to do pretty much the same thing, but it'll give you some good insight into that.
As far as calibrating and pre-processing, is that what you're saying?
Actually, yes. Batch pre-processing script, and it just came up in a post on Cloudy Nights, and that's actually what really stimulated me to want to bring it up. Everyone says pixinsight is difficult, and I agree. Pixinsight is difficult. It's difficult to learn, but it's extremely powerful. Batch pre-processing script, for some reason I did not know this existed when I bought pixinsight, and I started going in and trying to integrate and align my images manually, and it blew my mind. So after trying for hours on end, I went out to DeepSkyStacker and processed my first few monochrome CCD images in DeepSkyStacker and compared them to the results that I got out of pixinsight that I struggled with. And the pixinsight results were a lot better. My final calibrated stacks were just blow away my DeepSkyStacker results, and I knew I had to figure out this whole pixinsight thing. So I'm reading, and this is probably my biggest gripe with pixinsight, is you read all this literature, but you have to pay careful attention to when the dates are, because if it's an article from 2011, they've probably come up with a better tool to do exactly what you want to do, and you read this whole tutorial, you're going through, you're doing all this stuff, and then like at the very, very end, you read that, oh yeah, but they've come up with this process that does it all for you. And that is batch pre-processing script. It pretty much is the same thing as DeepSkyStacker. I get.
This is Sean. I joined a little late, but you were saying that you got better stacks from pixinsight than DeepSkyStacker. Can you clarify how it was better? Like better stars, less noise, or better color, or how?
Just visibly less noise. And I don't know if it was a stacking method. I mean, I know pixinsight uses Winsorized Sigma clipping, whereas DeepSkyStacker uses the regular Sigma clipping. But spitting it right out, it looked better to me. I don't know. It's hard for me to say what was better. I could just look at it and it looked like it had less noise. Now I know I could probably take it into pixinsight and actually do an analysis on it and see if it did have more or less noise. But what I've kind of discovered is it almost doesn't matter if pixinsight tells you it has more noise or less noise. Pick the image that looks better. It might be the noisier image, but if it looks better, then that's probably the one to go with. It's hard for me to explain exactly why, but I definitely noticed better results.
Adam, I'll chime in on that too, real quick. That's why I was asking. I could provide maybe a video for doing all that in nebulosity as well. But I tried DeepSkyStacker when I first started as well, and again, I can't put exact technical reasons as why, but the DeepSkyStacker never provided the same quality image out of the stacking and all of the pre-processing calibration. For whatever reason, there may be the way they're applying the calibration frames are different. There's less control maybe, or maybe I don't know how to use all the controls on it, but I went away from that. I've also used CCDStack, which provided amazing results from the stacked images, but it might be good, even if we don't do a presentation at all of them, just to kind of have video tutorials on each one of those programs for whoever wants to use each of them to start with.
Question about the noise.
Yep.
Has anybody ever seen or had troubles with backyard EOS introducing noise into your pictures, into your images?
I've got
a friend that he has had that problem. I've been using backyard EOS. I'm using darks. I'm putting darks in there, and I'm still seeing noise after the processing. And I thought darks were supposed to take care of that.
Well, there will always
massive.
Will always have noise. It's kind of hard for me to kind of give you a general on this. Have I seen backyard EOS introduce noise? Backyard EOS, as far as I know, doesn't really do anything to the files besides change the file name. It pretty much records the raw file directly as Canon wants it to, so I don't think that particular program could introduce noise in itself. If you're seeing anything odd being introduced by backyard EOS or anything like that, just make sure you don't have live view on. That's one thing that can potentially introduce noise into your image. If that's not the case, and obviously, actually, I don't even know who was talking, so I don't know.
That's Tim. This is Tim.
Tim. Okay. So,
may I ask something, Tim? When you say it used to be better and now it's not so good, are you talking last winter compared to now?
I'm sorry. Say that again.
When you say it used to be better and now it's gotten worse, are you talking last winter compared to now?
Actually, no. Oh, I'm all confused now.
Okay, just remember, when you're imaging in the summer, you need a cool DS. You need something.
Okay,
cool,
right.
That will give you a lot more noise. It's kind of like the guy that says, "Hey, I went to an off-axis guider and my graph in PhD looks crummy." Well, that's because he's on an off-axis guider and he's using 4 times as much focal length as he used to. You know,
okay.
So you got to compare apples to apples. And if you're saying that last summer and it was good and this summer it's bad, that's another thing. I don't know how backyard EOS could introduce any problems.
Okay.
It could be that there's some problems because your cables, if you used to save to the card and now you're saving through a cable to your computer, yeah, but it's not backyard EOS that's doing it. It's the cables into the computer that might be doing it. And as Craig Stark always says, change the cables. First, change the cables.
But aren't your darks supposed to get rid of your noise?
If they're perfect and if they're perfectly matched and everything else like that, they do a big job. But remember, even darks can be hit by cosmic rays and everything else like that. That's why you want to average out darks and stuff. So no, there's nothing that gets rid of all noise. Noise has got a random nature to it, so you know it can be different. What darks are particularly good at are hot pixels, cold pixels, and pixels that aren't generating uniformly throughout, and it can clean those up. But if it's random stuff, not as much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's even such thing as photon noise, where the photons coming from the object aren't arriving at the time you would expect. And you have to take a large sampling of them before you get an accurate reading of them. And in terrestrial photography, you don't think about that. But in astrophotography, you do. And remember, it's not just about reducing the noise as it is growing the signal. The signal is what you really need. You need those photons from the object to arrive, and if they haven't arrived, you don't have anything. You just have a blank screen. So you really need a lot of those before you're overcoming the noise.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Comments?
No, I just wanted to make a correction to what I had stated earlier. I did post it on the video where I stated that Images Plus uses DSS to grade the images. That is, in fact, incorrect. It uses its own module called grade file, grade images. So I want to point that out so people are not misled by the means. And I've also posted that on the video to make sure that we have accurate information as well.
Cool.
And then, Tim, you said you had been using a DSLR and an extra noise had been introduced. Or not necessarily just introduced, but you're finding that your dark's not all the noise. Was that correct?
I'm finding after even using the darks that after the images have been processed, that I still see massive amounts of noise in there.
Did you know?
I don't understand that, I guess.
Have you noted the temperature of your darks versus that of your lights? Because that will also have.
Yeah, after my last imaging session, which was on the 20th, 19th, and 20th. At that time, I was doing the darks at the same time I was doing the lights.
Okay.
And the temperatures were within 1 or 2 degrees.
That should absolutely take care of it. Are you doing any sort of dithering in between?
But yeah, actually I have been. Those 2 days is the first time I actually figured out the dithering process. So I was actually dithering on those.
What type of data rejection are you using when you stack? Do you use a sigma of some kind? A sigma rejection routine?
I'm think my mind.
Okay. Your basic choices are a straight average, or an add, or some kind of sigma.
Average, straight across the board average.
Okay, if you're using a straight across the board average, make sure that you get at least 9 is the magic number where sigma clipping takes in. But the more, the better within reason. You know, for most of us, I think 16 is a good number to shoot for. And then use a sigma rejection. I don't know what it's called in DeepSkyStacker since I don't use DeepSkyStacker. But
Sigma cap, yeah.
Sigma cap. What that does is it organizes all of the different values for any given pixel, and it throws out everything greater than 2 standard deviations, and you keep all the rest of the data. So that will help some in rejecting the noise. But I think one of the things you're fighting now is just that's what happens in the summer. It gets noisier with a DSLR.
Tim, which DSLR do you have?
650D.
650D. Which one? I'm sorry, which?
That's the
Canon T4i.
T4i. Okay.
Was there a change in ISO when you noticed the noise?
I was sticking with 800 ISO all night long. That's what I've been shooting lately.
Are you using a battery or DC power?
The DC power, direct, and just plugging directly into the outlet, AC. AC to DC.
Yeah, with a fake battery in there.
Right.
You're probably doing as well as can be done. There may be some things you're doing in processing. You're setting your black point. Well, you've got to be careful here. But I would suggest that you're probably not doing as badly as you think. You may be trying to compare your pictures with a dedicated cooled CCD camera.
Okay.
And you're not going to win. You know, you just can't do that. You can't cool a CCD camera down to -20 or -30 degrees and compare it with one of our DSLRs. I've got a 600 from Canon, and yeah, I see the noise, and that's one of the reasons I don't go out there during the summer with it.
Well, I'm thinking about building a camera cooler, so.
Tim, is the noise in the background, or do you notice it in the lighter portions of your image?
Background.
How's your any light pollution?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm in a orange zone.
I'm in a red zone, so I battle it all the time. Light pollution looks a lot like noise. Just that dim glow of the sky really does look a lot like noise, and I think it becomes really hard to discern what's actually happening is if you treat light pollution as noise, the signal of the actual objects are barely coming out of that light pollution glow. So what ends up happening is it looks like your image is noisier, but what it is it's just kind of separating itself from the light pollution, which is kind of what happens in general with signals separating themselves from dark current in your camera or like read noise in your camera. So
all those red dots aren't?
Red dots, hot pixels, well...
Hot pixels, yeah.
Hot pixels are noise, but they should calibrate out relatively easily. Noise in general, I would think of as just being like a glowing pedestal that's kind of sitting below your data in an individual sub.
Okay.
If I look at a raw dark of mine, it just has a little bit of a glow to it, and actually I have to look pretty deep. With a T4i, I've actually seen darks from the T4i. They look pretty black to me, just straight out of it.
Let me ask you this: when you go gather data, how far over is your histogram on the back of your camera? What does it look like?
Oh my gosh, I don't even look at that. I don't even look at that when I'm shooting.
Okay, then what I think would help is you may not be getting enough data, and by the time you stretch everything up to where you can see the signal that you want, where you can see the nebula, where you can see the stars, you might have, in order to do that, you might have to be stretching way, way, way up. All that noise comes up with it. What you might want to do is take longer exposures. When you take, what exposures are you taking right now? What's the length of your exposure? Pardon?
240 guided.
240 seconds with what kind of a telescope? What f ratio on the telescope?
80 ED, 7.5.
7.5, 240 seconds in a light polluted zone. Actually, you're probably getting, you're probably saturating up there someplace. Don't you think, guys? I mean, I don't know what orange would do exactly.
What type of
how
filter?
bright are the exposures when you look at them, the raws?
Yeah, they're not bad. They're fairly dark. I mean, they're not very bright at all. The stars look decent.
Yeah, I mean,
they don't look bad until after I stack and bring the histogram up a little into the lower third. That's when it brightens up the background quite a bit. But
well, when you first expose things, the back of your camera should give you something up into the lower third. Okay, now that's a little fake, but you should have a break between the bottom left-hand side of your histogram and where the image, where the data hump is.
Are you using backyard EOS?
yes.
You can use the histogram on that.
Yeah, the basic histogram tool, but you got to get enough light in the first place. Otherwise, all the process you're doing is just going to be pushing noise up into the visible range. But I tell you, 240 seconds at f7.5 at ISO 800 should be doing that, and particularly in light pollution.
It seems good to me, yeah. I mean, I'm at f10, and 240 seconds would, in a red zone, would put a nice glow on. That seems like an okay exposure to me. Keep in mind, it might learn about the histogram though, because you need that. If the moon's up, your exposures are going to be shorter. So you really should try and get the optimal exposure using your histogram.
One other question, real quick, on that: when you're doing your calibration, are you using flat frames and bias, or are you doing your calibration immediately?
I haven't figured out the bias yet, so I'm not adding any bias. I just figured out the flat frames.
So you're not removing a bias from your flat frames either?
I haven't started using bias yet. No.
You need to use bias when you're using flats, as far as I know.
Or you can use flat darks.
Yeah.
But remember, the first thing the camera does is add some number to the whatever it is. It adds a bias, and if you're starting to divide your light frames with your flat frames, and you haven't calculated that into the equation, which is what taking dark frames or biases would do, then you're going to get a funny number. I wanted to ask another line of questioning. I think that was a good one, but have you gone out to a dark sky and tried it?
Not yet. This is my first year at imaging, so I'm just in my observatory.
Yeah, go give it a try. Just take your rig out there in the dark someplace and give it a try and see what happens.
Okay.
I would say as well to look at the temperature of the raws that you were taking that did not appear to have that much noise, and the temperature of the ones that do appear to have the noise, and see if there's a big difference. Because I noticed my sensor gets around 90 degrees, like there's all kinds of noise.
Put your camera away.
My ambient at night was like in the 50s to 60s, and then the camera was saying in the 70s. Temperature-wise.
But to answer your first question, if you are applying flat frames without removing a bias or dark for your flats, you are introducing noise that way.
Okay. Well, I'm glad this is going on now because new moon's coming up here pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I'll know better to do the bias.
I don't know about you guys, but does it seem like the days are getting shorter and the nights are getting longer? It just seemed like the last 24 hours or so. All of a sudden, it's just different.
I don't know. I feel like the sunrise comes too soon. I've been chasing some late targets, and 4 o'clock comes around too early. 4 a.m.
Adam, I don't know how you've seen any stars in the last month. You're only a couple hours away from me, and I literally haven't seen a star in probably 3 straight weeks. I think tonight's going to be the first clear night.
Tonight? Yeah, I waited up all night last night. Well, actually, I waited up till like 1 o'clock, and observatory was open and everything, and never got clear.
I'm on the East Coast, and it's been horrible.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Tim, you think you got some good answers? I agree with that about biases. If you're not taking biases with flats, you're reintroducing the bias right back into your calibrated stack. So that, the bias error right back into that stack. So that could be your issue. You might just want to go through, take the same exact data. You could try processing it without flats and see if you get that same noise. Then go in, take biases, and process it with biases and flats.
Right. You can take the bias now. Just cap your camera and take them now and apply them.
Yep.
Just use the same ISO as you used with your flats.
Okay. I just have to read up on bias then because I'm not even sure how to take a bias.
They're the easiest frames to take.
Super
Even
simple.
I can do them.
Okay.
Just,
Okay.
just set DSLR to the fastest exposure possible, so as near 0 as you can get. And I think on the T4i it should be 1/4000th of a second.
Okay.
And that's all you need to do, just put your cap, put the lens cap over top of the camera, or just leave the body cap on. Set it to
And the back cap too. If you have a little viewfinder, light can leak in. Put it in a dark room. Put it in a closet.
Yeah, and then take anywhere between. I did for my biases. I took 100 of them and then just put them together. They're super simple. That takes a few minutes to do.
Okay.
Yeah, once you take it, you're gonna laugh at how easy it is.
Well, it sounds pretty doggone easy. I thought flats. When I took the flats, I'm going, why the heck haven't they done this before?
Yeah, flats are the hardest thing to take.
They're the
Flats are
hardest.
the hardest?
Oh yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
This
they're
will
the hardest.
if you're not counting regular pictures.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other than the lights.
Yeah, other than
I,
The weather
I
allows
didn't realize flats were that hard. I put a garbage bag over the scope and started clicking away.
and then you're going to find bias without any issue. It's not a
Okay.
problem.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Hey, can I ask a question real quick about these black points?
Yes.
Adam, that you were saying you don't move your black point all the way to the base of the histogram, like in one step. You do it a little bit at a time.
yes.
You said that you've noticed that it sort of gives like a stair step, or it sort of staggers the histogram when you do that.
Posterizes.
It
Well,
posterizes it all at
you know
once.
what?
Is that right?
You know what? I was afraid I was going to get asked this question. I don't know. I actually was experimenting with it earlier today, and I've heard a lot of people say that it gives you that stair-step effect where your histogram just doesn't look pretty. It starts to get that jagged look to it. I also read on the pixinsight forum from one of the guys who knows what he's talking about that when you're stretching your histogram, you should do it in as few iterations as possible. So I've seen it both ways, and I tried doing pixinsight in few iterations, and or in as few as possible, and I didn't have good luck with it. I had to do it in more iterations. And in general, I think that I probably do my first one in a pretty strong curve, and then my next few I do smaller. But I don't know what the best practice is for that, and I wish I did. I don't know if there is a difference between the two. I've heard it repeated enough that it's like one of those things that you kind of repeat just out of habit. And even as I was going through it earlier today, I was thinking, am I going to repeat this or am I not going to repeat it? I decided to repeat it, and I probably could have gone either way. But
One of the things that I tend to do is, as I image, I do not finish the luminance, because I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I made early on as I was processing, was that I would end up bringing the histogram, trying to bring out as much detail as possible in the early stages and the early steps. And you tend to not want to do that because you want to give yourself a little bit of room, especially in the histogram, to bring out that contrast in the final steps of the image. Because when I was first doing it, you could see that posterization happening very, very early on. If you take a look at some of my early images in my Astrobin link or on my SmugMug page, such as, oh, I can't remember which one it was. It was one of the NGC 1333 and IC 434, if I remember right. But anyway, you can see that there's some posterization happening because what I did was in my luminance, I wanted to make it look absolutely perfect before combining it back with the RGB image. So you want to give yourself that little bit of play and a little bit of a space for contrast work to give that sense of depth and 3D look to the image at the end. And that's what has worked for me. Some people like to finish it. I'm taking the route of little steps as I go through and just making small adjustments. One of the things that I never mentioned in my dark dusk tutorial, I'm not sure if people had noticed it or not, and I'm not sure if I touched on it, I'm trying to remember, but I only brought it up enough just so I could see detail, so I didn't bloat everything immediately, because you're going to start doing those iterative steps later on, and you're going to just start doing more and more bloat. You're going to lose more color detail and sort of coloring, not necessarily color detail within the image. So my recommendation, baby steps. Other people, you know, this is a philosophy. Might say just go do it in one shot. Anything else?
well, if it's a philosophy, then I guess we can't argue over it, right?
Yeah, it's become a religious debate in a
Yeah.
scientific world. Perfect.
So moving on to ICNR then, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know if does anyone have any other questions? We don't really have to keep the meeting if there's nothing else going.
There is nothing else in the chat. A couple people have left us. Bye-bye to them. I noticed in last week's presentation, when you go there, you got 8 to 10 minutes before we actually get going because we were trying to figure out how this machine works. Is there any way to go in and edit that so that people listening to it don't get turned off by the first 5 or 8 minutes, whatever that was?
Oh yeah, I can do that. I actually didn't notice that on last week's video. I'm gonna have to go back and check it out.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a bit of a buffer before the video.
Yeah, well, we're talking about who's doing what and stuff like that. And then comes the question, now that we've done it twice and we're old, experienced people at this, are we doing the right things? Some of you who've come and gone, you know, there's certain things we have to do, like mute everybody so we aren't going to be breaking in and asking questions all the time. We're kind of controlling the flow of things. Are we doing a good job? Is there a better way? Can somebody think, like Bruce comes in with, hey, just share the whole screen. Boom, we know something now. Anything else we need to know?
I think you're doing a great job.
Okay, thanks. I think the guys that have prepared the presentations did most of the work, so congratulations to them.
I think I need a bigger screen. I can't read.
Yeah.
Adam, do we want to set up some kind of Google Doc to start lining up what presentations there's going to be over time, or did you have something sorted out for that already?
No, I don't have anything lined up for the next future presentations.
What about the second half of your today's presentation?
Well, that's one thing that I was keeping in mind. I don't have anyone for next week, so this will probably be a good one to go into next week.
You could just set up like a Google Calendar or something that we can all, I mean, if anybody has stuff they want to present, I have a couple of things I'd love to share, and I'm sure there's lots of things maybe people will start asking for, hopefully, if they keep getting attended.
I'm giving a presentation up at Sequoia National Park next end of July on nightscape photography, which is way too, I don't think that's the kind of thing we want to do on this, because this is astroimaging and I see a distinction between the two. But it would keep me from really trying to do anything. I've also got another one coming up at Julian Starfest in August where I'm going to do a presentation, and I haven't started on that one yet. So I'd love to help you guys present something. I think you're advanced in processing compared to where I am. I do know some stuff about Sequence Generator Pro and some stuff like that. But so I'm willing to volunteer to do that stuff and pitch in and do my share. I just kind of busy the next couple of months getting ready for Julian Starfest and Sequoia. So yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that.
Well, we're never going to turn anyone down who's willing to offer whatever insight they have on anything. I don't know what the best way to do it is, whether I'll probably post on Google another thing for topics, and people post under your name, post whatever topics you're interested in presenting, and if you can, whatever Sunday you're available or you know you'd be available for it, and I'll start going through it. And I mean, I'm not going to turn anyone down, so you all know what you're going to be good at presenting, and I don't want to limit the conversation to any specific topics either. So Alex, if you know when you're available, you're welcome to chime in and schedule it whenever. But
okay, I'll see what I can do about it.
All right.
It might be
So next week, Adam, is your continuation moving into pixinsight. Is that right?
Next week, it would move into pixinsight, and I might do a dry run of it and get an idea exactly how long it's going to take. This one took a lot longer than I was expecting, so if it turns out that it won't take the whole entire time, then maybe I can try and get a second person, or maybe come up with some sort of different format to test out. It's early on in this, so we can always test out different formats, whether it's just an overall Q&A. We can share our screens, so we could show each other pictures if we chose, or I don't know, whatever we may care to do.
Right. Okay, so I need to get with you on the presenter. I emailed Scott Rosen, and he's willing to help us out with a presentation on maybe screen mask invert, like a very specific topic, and then spend like 30 minutes or something going over the details on how he does it. So I thought that would be great. But just I'll email you and we'll go over the details. But I'd like to give him a heads up on how it works and runs and what to expect before we just say, okay, go.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We'll get him. Make sure he's familiarized with how Google works. I'm trying to think. With an additional moderator in there, there's not much that can go wrong with the presenter. They just have to make sure they have the correct screen clicked. But I would get him used to that. And Scott is welcome on, and I would love to have him because his photos are amazing. And he's a DSLR guy, which I like even more because he's doing it with the DSLR rather than an expensive CCD camera. It's just a great example of not having to spend a ton of money on this hobby, even though we probably all choose to.
Is anybody into Star Tools, using Star Tools, avid?
I am. This is Sean.
I would be very interested in seeing a presentation on Star Tools.
That's what I think Ivo said he was willing to give a presentation as well. He's a developer.
Yeah.
He's welcome on too. I mean, I don't know how much I should reach out. Forum posted with Scott, and I've been in things with Ivo, but I don't know how much of their time to offer or whether to ask them. But I know we're all probably just as close with these guys as each other. But
I'll ask Ivo.
I already asked Ivo as well. I shot him a message on Cloudy Nights. I didn't hear back from him, but I'll send him a follow-up.
That would be great.
Yeah,
I have Elements 12, but that's a little deep for me right now.
You know, that question about do you need Photoshop? I like the answer. You know, there's a lot of things we don't need that we go ahead and buy, and then you get somebody. There's a lot of people that can do amazing things with tools that I look at and I go, I don't understand the interface. I don't understand anything about that. But one of the questions I always ask is, what do the big boys use? And the answer is that the big boys use Photoshop eventually. Quite often they use Photoshop. Some of them, a lot of the really hardcore pixinsight people will use pixinsight all the way through, but even then I hear a lot of them go, and then I take it over to Photoshop to finish it up.
The only thing I use Photoshop for is color. That's it. Pixinsight does all the heavy work for me because I find that Photoshop still is.
Well, the things that are astronomical, I think Pixinsight is superior, more powerful program if I could figure out how to use it.
It is now.
The parts that I do know how to use, yeah, it works wonders. It's just that new stuff is really challenging, and we've all been. Let's not discuss that again. The point is that do you need Photoshop? No, you don't need Photoshop. You don't actually need a driven mount. It's just that if you really want to be good at this someday, yeah, I think you'll be getting it eventually.
I think Bruce's other question, though, was, Adam using, what was Adam using? Was it Elements, or was it full-blown Photoshop, or what was it?
Bruce has left the conversation, but I read it as he's got Elements, not CS or whatever the latest version of that is. The big
I'm using CS4. I think Bruce was asking about Elements, or I don't know if it was Bruce, but somebody asked about the limitations of Elements.
Yeah. Can you do all this in Elements is essentially the question.
And not 16-bit files, only 8-bit files was the answer, which causes its own issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Time to say goodnight.
All right, guys.
See you guys.
I am looking at a clear sky right now, so.
Getting out for the first night in a month.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good one. Good night, guys.
Night.
Thank you.